Welcome to another ideaSPACE Craft-Along. My name is Christiana Urbano. I work at the Public Library of Brookline in the reference department, and I also work on our ideaSPACE Makerspace program when I'm in the building. So during this time when the buildings were closed, we've been bringing you all a little bit of ideaSPACE in your own homes through online video. This week, we're going to be doing a little mini Pride celebration. We're going to be making Pride tapestries on cardboard looms. So if you want to follow along, we're going to need some cardboard. This can be scrap cardboard that we're going to make our loom out of. A ruler to measure out where you want your notches in your loom. Pencil to mark that, and a pair of scissors to cut it out, and then whatever yarn colors you would like. So I'm going to be doing a rainbow tapestry, and my co-host this week, Tiffany, who is a cataloger at the library, is going to be doing, you're doing the bi flag, right?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So if you want to gather those things, I'll let maybe Tiffany introduce herself a little bit. Do you want to tell us about kind of what you do at the library, Tiffany?
Sure. So in cataloging and technical services, we are the ones that get we accept all the books that we buy and we add them to the catalog and we put the call numbers on them and we make sure that they're ready to go out to all of you.
And it looks like my cat, Wendell, is showing off the finished project of a much larger tapestry that I did at another point in time. So that tapestry behind me, I made on my real loom, which is this big wooden loom. Today we're going to be making a miniature version of this, so a much smaller tapestry than this, on a loom that we'll make ourselves. But the cool thing about weaving is that looms are basically just squares with notches. Buddy! Squares with notches that are evenly spaced. So you don't actually need like a professional loom to do weaving. You just need a rectangle and notches to put thread on. How'd you get up there, bud? Down you go. All right. So we'll get started. If you have all your materials, I'm going to cut to my desk cam so you can see how we're going to make our own miniature version of a loom out of upcycled materials. All right. So you can see here I have just some regular cardboard that is just from an old box. And what I'm going to do is measure out where I would like notches on my homemade loom. So for this, it's going to be, I'm just going to do like every inch or so. So I measured out before we got started like a ½ inch from the straight side and made a little mark, and then every inch until I reached the end of the cardboard. And you just want your cardboard piece to be a little bit bigger than the final project that you're going to want to make. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut a little notch into each of those marks and try and make them about the same size notches. If they're not exactly right, that's totally okay though. You can see here, I just have little notches all the way along each side of my cardboard loom. And then you can either use yarn. I happen to have what's called warp thread, which is a special weaving thread, but it's about the same weight as like embroidery floss, so that works well, or a lighter yarn or a regular yarn, all work if you're doing this at home. And I'm gonna tie that on to one of the farthest end notches that I have on my loom. Just with a regular old knot is totally fine. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this thread straight down to the notch that matches on the bottom. I'm going to wrap it around that notch and then head back up. So it's kind of making a figure S as we go along. So then I'm going to wrap it around this notch. And then go straight down, wrap it around the next notch on this side, and back and forth. And the finer the yarn you're using, the closer together you're gonna want these warp threads. And then I'm just gonna tie off this one at this far end. And I'm just adjusting a little bit because this one turned out a little bit loose, and I don't want anything to be, you want these taut. They don't have to be super tight, but you want them pretty taut. So if you look on this side, I've got lines running up and down. And if you look on the back side, I just have these little like stitches running across the top and bottom. And that's what's called our warp. And that is the thread. It usually is pretty hidden. It's not going to show up a lot in your final product. The color, the really brightly colored threads are usually the weft threads, the weaving threads. So that's what I'm going to do in my rainbow colors. And if you have some extra cardboard, one thing you can do that I'm going to do today is put a little bit of a spacer in at the bottom. This makes it a little bit easier to feed the thread over and under the warp threads. And it also gives you a little more, because it creates this extra space underneath. And it's also helpful because it will give you a little more wiggle room at the end when you tie off your final project. So I'm gonna make this my bottom, the bottom of my tapestry. So I'm gonna actually start with my purple because I'm doing a rainbow and I want the red at the top. So I'm gonna make this part the bottom. And the weaving, the most basic weaving stitches are really, really simple, which is one thing that I really like about weaving is that if you went to elementary school, you probably have done this with paper at some point. So you can cut yourself a good sized chunk of thread. And I have a needle. I happen to have a big chunky tapestry needle, but if you don't, you can just do this with your fingers.
Yeah, and if you knit or craft, you can also use a darning needle.
Oh yeah, that would be really good too. And I'm doubling up my yarn just for speed. Just because this is a slightly thinner yarn and I want to try and move through at least a few colors for y'all today. So the thinner the yarn is, the more times you're going to have to go back and forth. So I'm going to double mine up so I don't have to go back and forth quite so many times. But if you remember from being in elementary school, you're just going to pick either over or under to start, and then you're going to alternate. And this is called a tabby weave. So you're going to go, I'm going to go under, over, under, over, under, and pull my thread through. And just leave a little bit of a tail at one end. And then I'm going to reverse back across. And this time, because I ended on an under, I'm going to start with an over and go back. And then with my fingers, I'm just going to smush down those weaves so that I get a solid stripe of color starting to form here. You don't want to put too much tension on your thread or you'll get kind of an hourglass shape out of your final project. So one thing that you can do is when you're weaving, if I weave slightly above, you want to kind of create a bubble shape. So this little arch here, and then you'll squish down the center of the arch and then the two side edges as a way to kind of distribute the tension without pulling too tight. And then when I finish a color, all I have to do is snip off the end and leave a little tail. And we'll deal with the tails at the end, but we don't have to worry about that too much right now. As long as you can catch it. And because we're right at the bottom, one thing I would like to do on mine is I'm going to add a little bit of a few little tassels at the bottom because I think that will be nice on my final one. So to make tassels, you're going to cut a few pieces of yarn that are the same length. You want them double the length of the final tassel because we're going to tie, if you think of tassels, they're just threads folded in half, but there's just a bunch of them. So I'm going to do a few threads that are all the same length. So because it's a lighter weight yarn, I'm doing 4. But if you have a thicker yarn, you can get away with like 2. I'm gonna pull them all together. And on my weaving here, I'm gonna choose 2 threads. I'm gonna lay this across and I'm gonna wrap the ends underneath the right side and then wrap the other ends underneath the left side. And catch them underneath. you know, I have a little tassel. And I like to just do them a little uneven, do them a little extra long at the beginning, and then I can always give them a haircut so they're all the same length. And I would kind of like to do some purple all the way across the bottom. So Tiffany, have you done a lot of weaving, or is this new to you?
It's fairly new to me. I think I did some in, high school art class. That was a very long time ago. So, but I have friends who do a lot of weaving, so I'm pretty familiar with the basics of it.
Yeah, I was surprised at how easy it was to pick up. Sometimes, some crafts can be pretty intimidating to jump into, and I was very pleasantly surprised by how quickly, a lot of the stuff that I already knew how to do, and I just didn't realize that I had been taught it already when I was a kid.
Well, and I also, because I knit and crochet, I'm pretty familiar with different types of fabrics, and I also sew, so I learned pretty early on how to recognize the difference between knit, crochet, and woven fabrics. So again, I kind of have a basic understanding of how the fabric goes together. So. And while Christiana's doing that, I'm just, going along, weaving mine, so.
Yeah, do you want to give us a peek of where you're at?
Sure.
What color are you starting with?
I'm starting with the pink, because the Bi flag is pink on one end, purple in the middle, and blue on the other end. So I have been, I started with the pink, and I just use scrap yarn from around the house. So this is what I've got so far. Let's move it out a little bit. So mine is a little bit larger, and since I'm doing normal weight thread, it's going to take a lot longer.
And I have my little tassels all in here now. Getting started. So I'm going to do a couple more rows of purple just to kind of lock those tassels in, because they'll probably be a little loose from where I started. And if you don't have yarn at home, you can also use an old cut up t-shirt. If you cut it into strips and then stretch the strips out, it'll kind of catch the knit of the fabric usually, if you have a knit cotton t-shirt. And that can be used as some sort of DIY yarn.
And this technique is also one of the ways you can darn knit, actually. To darn a knit, you kind of use threads from one end of the hole to the other end, like we did with the cardboard, and then you weave the yarn through that row of threads, and that's how you fix the sock.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Or anything else that's knit, really.
And actually, while I'm here, I'm going to show off. So now that you know kind of how a regular tabby weave works, what you can also learn to do is stripes, either vertical stripes or horizontal stripes. And those are just a combination of this tabby weave, and you just have to think a little bit about how you layer the colors. You just don't end your first yarn. So I'm going backwards. I'm going to need blue next. So we'll add a few stripes. So you can create horizontal or vertical stripes by just layering the tabby weave. If you want horizontal stripes, you'll do a tabby weave of one color for 2 rows, and then the next color for 2 rows, and the next color for 2 rows. If you want a vertical stripe, you'll do one color for 1 row, one color for the next row, and then back to the first color. And that's because all of the first color will end up on the same backs each time. So let me show that to you a little bit. So this one ended on a back. So I'm going to do an over for my aqua blue. But then when I reach the end of this row, I'm just going to drop this blue and I'm going to come back to it. But I'm going to pick up the purple and run the purple the same side that I ran the purple last time. So I'm going to run it. The aqua is going to be my over from the last time. And then this is going to be my under again, my purple. And you just want to be sure to catch the second thread so that it holds your thread in place. So then I'm going to drop my purple thread and I'm going to feed the aqua underneath it. And my aqua is going to start with an over again. And as we do that, because the top thread is going to be the same color every time and the bottom thread is going to be the same color every time, it will end up forming vertical stripes once we do it a few times, when we smush everything down. That might sound a little confusing, but you'll sort of see it happening as you go. And there are a bunch of really good weaving books, and a bunch of them are available as ebooks through our online resources. The other place that has really good weaving resources is Creative Bug. We've talked about 1,000 times on these videos. It really is wonderful and has like super high quality videos.
Yeah, it's
how to do things.
Amazing.
It's so good. We talk about it a lot because it is so good.
Yeah.
It's not just because we want you to go use your library. It's because we use it so much. We love it.
Especially because they've got like beginner classes, and then as you get better, or develop more skills, there are also like more advanced classes.
Yeah. And there's also just like really cool artists who they got to do some of the videos.
Yes. That
you would never get to have. You wouldn't be able to have a class with every single one of these really cool people from across the United States. And it's all right there. It's very awesome. And they have a huge number of textile art videos, and they also have a huge number of like baking videos, which I actually haven't used as much, but they have like lots of cake decorating things and stuff like that.
Yeah. They also have like watercolor painting and art journaling and hand lettering.
The art journaling ones are super good. So as you can see, because I've been alternating, then all the purple threads tops are all in the same place, and all the blue threads tops are all in the same place. So it ends up creating a vertical pattern as you go. And you can also create shapes. That's the thing, like if you wanted to look up sort of some more complicated weaves, it's still really easy. You're using the same basic puzzle piece. Like if this is like, you have the building block. If you know how the tabby weave works, then a whole bunch, not every single weave is built on that, but a huge number of them are, and you can do a lot just by doing tabby weaves in different combinations and in different, like to create different shapes, and just starting and stopping your threads in different places. You can create like big triangles or blocks of pattern. So you can do a lot really quickly, which I think is nice. I also like that this is a little bit more planned out because I know that I want it to be in the rainbow stripes, but I do like in general with weaving that you don't have to have a big plan going in. You can just kind of pick your colors that you know you like a bunch of textiles that you know you want to use, and then it's very improvisation friendly.
It's also, especially if you're working on something very basic, it's pretty easy to fix it as you go, because the ends are open. So if you realize you're one out of pattern, you can just pull that out. So like I just realized I did the same row 2 times in a row. So I just, pulled that top, like the latest thread out, and it's really easy to go back in and do it again.
So the tapestry that I showed earlier, I didn't use any kind of pattern. I just would weave with a color until I got tired of weaving with that color, and then I picked up a new color and used that one for a while and kept going.
You can also use like different types of yarn in the same project.
Yeah, and that, I think the texture that you get out of something like that is really, makes it really interesting. And you can also kind of, even if you don't know a ton of different, if you don't have a bunch of different yarns, you can create that difference in texture by doing different types of weave, or by doubling up the yarn in some places and going with a single weave other places. So I'm gonna switch actually to a single weave, like a single ply of yarn for a little bit for the green, so that I get a little bit of variation. And I'll actually maybe I'll do a little shape. So I'll do a little triangle here. So I'm gonna have a triangle that goes kind of from here to here is what I'm thinking. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start by going all the way across, but then I'm gonna stop. When I come back to weave, I'm gonna end a little sooner as I go. So I'm gonna start on the bottom because my aqua started on the top. And I'm gonna go back and forth a few times to the bottom of my triangle. And you'll see how much longer this takes because I didn't double up.
Or like where I'm at.
Yeah.
I've got a little over an inch done though, so pretty pleased.
Oh yeah, that's a much finer.
Yeah. Essentially because this is what I had around the house.
Yeah.
I actually didn't have any purple yarn, but I had purple crochet thread, which is very, very thin. So I did that where I put 3 strands together, and it's still pretty small, but
yeah,
it's way better than just one of these trying to get through.
I've never crocheted with anything that small. I'm using like DK weight, like the kind of mid weight right now.
Yeah. Well, I was making a lot of like lace edging for things at a point. So I used thin crochet thread and very small crochet hooks. But they were all very small projects too. So I can't
and
imagine.
you could definitely do this with like embroidery floss, but you might want a very small loom for that unless you want to be there a really long time.
Yeah, that would probably be more appropriate for like a bookmark or something.
Yeah, definitely. So I've gone back and forth twice here, and then this time I'm just gonna stop at I have 5 warp threads, and I'm gonna stop at the 4th warp thread and then double back. But everything else stays the same, so I'm just gonna maintain my over under pattern. I'm just gonna start forming that triangle. And if you don't have a needle also, you can cut a piece of cardboard and into a little rectangle and then punch a hole with a hole punch. And that is a needle for the purposes of this, because you're not trying to sew anything, you're just trying to help yourself navigate the layers.
You could probably also use a large safety pin on one end.
Oh yeah, that would work well.
You'd have to switch it every time, but you know, if you're having problems, it'll do in a pinch.
Yeah. I'm going to keep doing the same thing where now I've done a few that go only to the 4th thread, and then this time I'm only going to go to the 3rd thread before I double back and do a few layers here. And I started with the big ends, so these ones will go super quick.
So since I'm doing a flag that's just 3 horizontal stripes, in order to change colors, do I need to do the same thing with having the one color? So when I end with one color, can I continue the over-under pattern with the next color as I've been doing?
Yes. You can just blend it seamlessly in, because you're just going to want a hard line across. That's what I did here. Yeah. So I just finished a row, and then I started the next row following the same pattern I had been following.
Okay, great.
It'll only create those stripes if you're literally alternating back and forth. But you can, if you do it like really carefully too, you can create kind of a cool like ombre effect into it, which could be fun as well. And you can start to see a little bit of the difference in texture here, just that this is like a finer, this is much like chunkier. And if you're using a heavier yarn, it's going to be much more apparent. Like you'll get a very big difference in texture if you're using a larger thread. I've done a few here, so now I'm going to go down to just 2, so these will be super quick.
So Lisa in chat says that they taped their yarn to a number 2 pencil to use. That's like a needle.
Oh. I'm sure there's plenty of things you can get creative with to make some of this easier so that you don't have to buy special tools.
Yeah. It's a very good like end of your yarn stash project to just find some nice colors and jump in and not have to get, you know, like you can buy looms of all different sizes, but you can also grab a wooden frame or make a wooden frame and just put nails into it at the distance that you would like your warp to be. I've seen people do, and then you can make really, really big looms, because a real standing loom would cost hundreds of dollars potentially, right? But a big wooden frame made out of a couple pieces of plywood is gonna cost, $10 at Home Depot or something like that, your hardware store. It's also a nice soft materials, quiet activity for kiddos. And it really works on like those hand-eye coordination things. And if they get their tabby weave off a little bit, it's still gonna look really colorful and fun when you're finished. So now what I'm gonna do is because I've created this triangle shape here, I'm gonna start my yellow from this side and start joining in to fill out the other half of the triangle that I missed, and then work into my yellow stripe. And I'm going to double up my yellow thread so that you can see how you would do this if you have a difference in thread weight, in yarn weight between two yarns that you're trying to join. So basically, because you just kind of estimate like how, so that here it's exactly, this yarn will be exactly 2 times thicker than my first yarn. So I'm going to join it every 2 layers. Sometimes it's going to not be that exact, so you can just kind of eyeball it. But here it's going to be exactly that. So this last green was under. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to join under. So I'm going to find, you can either start right up against here or 2 in. So I'm going to skip an over and an under, and I'm going to join there and weave my yellow in here and then back in between these green threads. And then I'm going back over and under. And then I can kind of smoosh this down out of my way and start again. And again, I'm gonna skip an under and an over, and I'm gonna go right in between that. And just meet up with the green.
Now, your project can be much shorter than the length of your loom, right?
Oh yeah, you can stop whenever you want. You can't make it bigger once you've started, but you can make it smaller. So you don't have to commit. The only reason that you would want to like be approximately right is because you're going to lose whatever extra like warp, whatever you used for your warp thread when you finish. So if you have a ton of leftover warp thread, it's just a little bit, you're like, oh man, lost a little more warp thread than I needed to. But there's no actual like reason that you can't end like right here, yeah, and just have this extra stuff at the top.
I'm here, so I've got my pink stripe done. So I'm going to go ahead and start my purple stripe in the middle. And this is, again, a different texture. So,
and that's nice too, because yours is going to end up then being, if you kind of do evenly spaced there, you'll end up with like kind of more of a flag shape.
Yeah.
Which is nice. And the other thing you could do is if you wanted actually the whole thing to be shaped like a triangle, you can do that. You could end here for this part of the tapestry and end here for this part of the tapestry. You could adjust it along and end up with, you can make like a woven pennant or something like that. You just might want to do a little more like planning on the geometry there. Rectangles are a little easier. So when I hit the end of the green, I just jumped up to, I just went a little bit further this time, but I did the exact same thing that I've been doing. So you mentioned that I think actually you talked to us a little bit about a cross stitch project you had been working on last time, Tiffany. Yes. Are you still working on that?
I finished it. I might even have it somewhere close by. But
really?
Yeah. I'm going to jump off camera for a second.
That's so great. I love cross stitch. It's also a very low barrier to entry craft, I think. It's pretty minimal, pretty inexpensive materials, and it's pretty easy to pick up. It's just making a lot of X's and maybe some diagonal lines. That's about it.
So I did 3 leaves that I'm going to frame and hang next to each other on the wall. So I did this one.
Oh, it's so pretty.
And this one. And this one.
That's awesome.
These are great travel projects because you literally can just put everything in a bag.
And for folks who've never seen cross stitch before, do you want to just kind of explain the idea of cross stitch? It's very simple, but
yeah. So I even have a pattern I can show. So essentially, this is called counted cross stitch, and you use a fabric that is a grid, and then you put according to this, you stitch an X every place that is colored in. So you count, down to here, and then you count the number of stitches this way, and you count the number of stitches this way. And it's just, you go across the row making a diagonal in each stitch, and then going back the other way, you go this diagonal way, and it makes an X. And it's pretty simple. You're pretty much always going to work from a pattern. and you can find patterns all over the place, books, internet. A lot of people give away, like they'll let you, they put their patterns online for anyone to use. And I think that there's probably some, there might be one or two on Creative Bug that might show you a little more detail, but it's very simple. Sometimes it can get very complicated if you're using a lot of colors and things like that. But if you're doing one color and a small project, it's very easy to pick up on.
It would be really easy to do like a pride patch.
Yes.
Out of it, and you wouldn't even need a pattern for that. Like you could just do rows of the color that you have in whatever embroidery thread that you have, and then cut it out. And I like to do, like, if I'm making a patch, I'll cut out it's called Ada fabric, the gridded fabric. When you're done into like a little circle or a square, and then you can just stitch some felt onto the back and add a little bar pin so it can go on your bag or jacket or whatever.
Yeah, you can also do things on like tea towels or bibs or pillowcases, things like that, as like a nice little addition, a little decoration.
It's kind of like, I think of it like, it's like textile, like color by number.
Pretty much, yeah.
So it's very nice. Like sometimes you don't want to like, it doesn't take like, it just takes like counting, but it's just following directions. It's very calming, I think.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I travel with it so often, because I get stressed out when I travel. And it's just something nice to kind of keep me calm and keep me focused on something other than being in an airport.
Mm-hmm. I made it through the yellow.
Yay!
We're getting there. So I just need a little bit of orange and a little bit of red. And I have a rainbow. I'm very excited.
Hey, so we're here, and I just realized some members of our audience might not know where Pride got started or what the origin of Pride is. Is that something either of you could speak about?
I can. So throughout the 20th century, there were various small movements for gay rights or gay acceptance. But in the 1960s especially, there were a lot of protests. So there were famous sit-ins at like cafes and diners where what we now call trans people are. Trans people go to, or gay people, because at the time it was illegal to wear women's clothes if you weren't a woman. It was illegal to be gay, generally speaking. But on June 28th in 1969, that's sort of considered the big start of the gay rights movement as a much larger movement. And on June 28th, 1969, at a bar in Greenwich Village called the Stonewall Inn, where trans folks and gay people and anyone that like was not full on straight, they used to hang out there. But there used to be a lot of police raids from the Morality Squad, as they were officially named. So that night, people had enough, and two transgender women essentially started a riot. They refused to leave, to accept the cops coming in. They refused to be arrested, and the police locked them in the bar so that they could, make all the arrests. And Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera essentially started a riot. They started smashing things, and then they all went out into the streets and literally had a riot. And then over the next couple months, they sort of became a movement in New York. And I think that the first Pride Parade was in 1970. It might be 71, but it was very early And both Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, because they were trans women, some gay people were not as accepting, but they really were spearheading the movement. And they actually did a lot of activism beyond just, pride parades. They also started organizations to help trans folks living on the streets, and trans and gay folks that needed housing and things like that. So it was really kind of an all-encompassing revolution.
That was a super great. I really enjoyed.
Well, thank you.
It made me feel extra appreciative of being able to do rainbow craft today and not have to think about doing rainbow craft. Do a pride craft today.
Yeah, the rules were very nitpicky. I think that in New York the rule was something like you had to be wearing 3 pieces of clothing that matched the gender on your driver's license.
That's horrific. I laugh because it's horrible.
Yeah, but they were, it was a lot. And that neighborhood in New York, right around Christopher Street, became a gay hub in the 70s and 80s. And it started out that way in the 60s, but it became really the queer part of town.
I'm on my last color. I'm excited. And I don't have any black or brown thread, so my pride flag tapestry is a little incomplete today. And I apologize. I really looked for it and I don't have any, and I was very bummed. But
This is my progress so far.
it looks so nice.
But yeah,
I like the texture a lot.
Yeah, the blue yarn I have is also a different texture, so it's more similar to the first one, but this really is a great way to use up scrap yarn.
It really is, especially these little ones, because it doesn't take a lot of yarn to do.
Yeah.
Them. So I'm getting to the end of my loom, I think. Yeah, I feel pretty good about that. So if I were by myself, I might go a little bit further up, but because we're running low on time, I'm gonna wrap up, I think. So I'm gonna show you kind of how you do the finishing here. So I'm gonna make sure everything is kind of smushed together how I like it. Do any adjustments. And then I'm going to go back to the back here and snip those little cross stitches one by one that I made at the beginning. Those threads where the warp threads wrap. And I'm gonna grab those ends and just tie them in a knot around the yarn that's woven over them. And I'm gonna do that one at a time, all the way along the top and all the way along the bottom. And you can either have this be just on its own, or you can also grab, if you have a stick or a little dowel, a wooden dowel, or just a stick from your backyard, you can just whip stitch onto the top rows and turn that into a nice little hanging piece, like my original one that I showed before, is on a wooden dowel. And if you have an uneven number for your end one, I'm just tying mine onto the previous extra thread so that it catches. And then once you've pulled all of this off, or you could even do it before you pulled it off, either way, you'll just take all of those loose ends and just kind of weave them in so that they disappear into the rest of your weaving. You don't have to be super exact about it. But you just want them tucked away so that they're not super prominent. If you're only gonna show the front part, you can also just stick them to the back and then knot them off and snip them, and then you won't have to worry about them at all. Awesome. But if you want to be able to show either side of the tapestry, then you want to weave them in a little more.
Probably a good thing we're stopping soon because my cat is really eyeing what I'm doing right now.
My cats love weaving. Actually, when I was working on the tapestry that I showed earlier, one of my cats was so excited and loved
here
it
she
so
comes.
much that she jumped up on the table and pulled the whole loom down and knocked over a cup of coffee onto my last laptop.
She came to visit, so.
It passed away. I'm just spin these. So I still have all my loose threads, but I'm going to show it to y'all anyway so that you can get a picture of it. Let me see.
And this is as far as I made it, so.
So mine is a tiny tapestry. It just has these little friendlies on the side. But again, I would just tuck those in and through and then snip them off so that they don't show on the front end. And I would give my bottom section here a little bit of a haircut. I might do that even now. So that I have a nice little shape to the bottom, but I can tuck this stuff out of the way so you can kind of see what it would look like if I did that. And that's my little rainbow. And then I would probably just use a little bit of this red on the end to make my little hanger. And that's just with a knot, so that's easy. So that was really fun. Thank you, Tiffany, so much for joining us.
Sure, I had fun too.
We would love to see if you make any rainbow tapestries or make a different flag that we did not make today. We would love to see them if you want to share them on Facebook. That would be awesome.
Will do.
Since we won't get to see y'all at the Pride Parade this year, which is a bummer. So that would be really great. It's been so much fun to do these ideaSPACE craft-alongs with you all. We are going to take a short break because the staff are returning to the buildings next week, which we're very, very excited about. So our book drops are going to start opening again on Monday, which is really awesome during business hours. We won't be opening our doors yet. We won't have stuff out yet, but that is coming in the future. So you can read our full reopening plan on our website and learn all the details. But we'll be going back, and because of that, we're going to put a brief pause on these. But don't be sad, because we have really, really exciting news that I can't talk about yet, but I'll get to talk about very soon about Craft-Alongs. It's not the end of Craft-Alongs, but they are going to get even cooler than they have been. So it's been really awesome to get to make stuff with you all. And I look forward to doing it again soon in a slightly new and exciting way. So thanks so much, Tiffany, for joining me.
Yeah, thanks. This was super fun. Thanks everybody for crafting along with us.
Thank you.